Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of this radical feminist book. Hope you've missed me. I've been taking a much needed break because summer break is over, so it's back to the grind, and I don't have as much free time, so I want to make sure that I get some videos out for you. We continue on our journey of analyzing this text, coming up with rebuttals, solutions, ulterior pathways, right? And to look at it from an Islamic perspective and see what we can do. And also understand their bizarre philosophy and personal mode. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The idea that men are too weak to cope with change is frankly offensive to men, and yet there are so few alternative models of masculinity on offer. In fact, there is an imaginative deficit within the mapped territory of masculinity. Well, if she thinks painting fingernails and wearing a dress and being really bizarre is masculine, then we're gonna have a different definition, aren't we? She hates heterosexuality, so I don't really trust her opinion of masculinity. So that should be noted. And she is not heterosexual herself, from my understanding. She called herself queer. So she's one of those gender benders, borders on bisexuality, whatever woke term she uses next. The stories that have been told about what men are and what they do are grand and wide and deep and deafening. They are unlike the flimsy peripheral stories that have traditionally been told about women, who have been relegated to supporting characters in stories and male heroism. Look, I've started to analyze more and more of female characters, and there's always that the female hero is always having to imitate men and trying to be tough, whether it's Arya Stark and taking out the Night King, with Wonder Woman and whatnot. It's just not real. Because when you see women actually fight, and then you realize how men are physically stronger than women, you start to see that Hollywood doesn't make female heroism outside of the masculine traits. They don't really show a graceful, witty queen who rules with something different. She always has to either be really cruel or really soft, and there's just something about having a very soft queen that's not as cool as a badass king who's, taking names and smashing skulls. It's just not the same. Just not the same. Until very recently. Right now, culture is finally making room for new role models for women and queer people. But straight men are still straitjacketed by the stifling narratives of patriarchy. Well, because men, we have our map for them. It's stiff because it is a narrow road. Okay? We don't need them putting flowers in their hair and getting in touch with their feminine and crying and eating bonbons and watching Sex in the City. It's weird. These women will emasculate men. And then they complain, where are all the real men at? It's very bizarre. And then you see the gold diggers who they want to really NBA players, NFL players who are peak physical condition, tall, money, and they want to be pampered with a princess treatment and flown out to these vacations, so they want to have that treatment. And so you realize these feminists don't speak for a lot of heterosexual women who want to be pampered. That's fascinating. They want provider men, and provider men are part of the patriarchy. Remember that. So the feminists will say patriarchy's bad, but how many women want a provider husband? How many women do want to be I want to leave this crappy CVS job. I don't want to be working as a Target cashier anymore or a Starbucks barista. I'd rather be home, relaxing, and having a man take care of my finances and then be able to have lots of intimacy and relax. And air conditioning. Think about that. Really analyze that. There's a gap going on here. Modern masculinity leaves so little room for stories that are not about conquest and violence. What makes men super hot? It's conquest and violence. Why do women write love letters to serial killers? Why do women fawn over like a lot of UFC fighters and boxers? Okay. It's just like, it's something very fascinating. You look at Khabib, you know, how many women would just be falling head over heels for him as he's dripping in sweat after he just won a fight on the octagon, you know, and like seeing him just pummel someone and win, and you're just soaking in that masculine rage. I mean, talk about an aphrodisiac. So she's not someone to tell us what, you know, men need to do, because she hates masculinity and she's trying to skew it, you know. Very witchy soul. And the way she adorns herself is a way that repels a lot of heterosexual masculine men. So if those men don't pick her, why is she then telling them how they need to act in order to be picked by her? Those men don't want her, so why should she be telling them how to be so that she would want them? You see? Very little room for supple stories that involve uncertainty, gentleness, and all the undiscovered countries of human heart. Gentleman stuff works to a degree, you know. There's a very suave, you know, Spanish man. Like, I'm thinking of like archetypes in cinema where he's like, I shall buy you flowers, and you get the flowers. The flowers shall be beautiful like you. And like kisses your hand. You're like, oh, stop it. But again, his gentleness is with the woman, but when a man rises up, then he's gonna put the smack down. You see, so he has to have a violent element to him. And all the undiscovered countries of the human heart. Modern masculinity is a cage and men are locked inside it. I don't want my husband in a skirt. I don't even like that Scottish stupid kilt that they wear. It's disgusting. You know, men shouldn't have too much jewelry. It's when you start to become overly perfumed and pampered and soft-handed and always worried about your looks, it's different, man. Then you border on becoming gay. I think a lot more women need to start speaking up, you know, because the very shiny, polished finance bros, you're like, okay, they got the money. Some women like that. They're perfectly white, straight teeth. But there's something about just a man who's got some scars. He's got some struggles. He isn't super rich, but there's like an edge. You know, a primalness to him. And the rest of us are locked in with him. You're not locked in with anybody. No one wants you, besides your queers. It will not be unlocked until it's considered less important to raise little boys to be men than it is to raise them to be human. No. We have a problem of boys not having male, strong father figures. Then they choose rappers and gangbangers and Scarface. The more you look at the past history, you know, think about some of these men in Africa. These tribes where they had a spear and they impale an elephant between the eyes, having to, you know, be strong and get back these hyenas. Ah! Like they had to be fearsome. Young boys had to learn that right away. And girls wanted to pick a guy like that. They didn't... I wonder if you just went around the world, like... We can't go back in time, but it would be fascinating to see, like... Okay, so you look at the tribes of America. These men, straight up, would paint their faces for war. They would paint the horses. And a straight up axe, a tomahawk, going through the air. Funk. Right there. You're on your horse, you know, bareback. Some of them, they didn't have saddles for a while. You're holding onto the mane. You got your spear. And all of a sudden, there's this bear just like munching around, eating honey from some hive. And then you gotta be like, okay, we're gonna keep going, but if that bear charges, we're gonna have to do something. Men were so close to wild animals. If you think about where my husband's from before all the jaguars were killed, you know, there was a time where you may come across a jaguar, you know, and you had to be strong. You had to be. And the women with their baby, you go, you're strong too. You gotta be strong. But your husband's like, put you right there, right in his head, you know. It's not like today you hide behind a little tree and then shoot it from far away. You had to be up close. So this has been, I think, bred into us for so many generations, and it's a good thing. An effeminate, ineffectual, feckless man who's a bumbling idiot, that's not someone whose genes you want to spread. You gotta nag him to go do stuff. You ain't nothing. Go out and do something. Go get a job. Like, he's got no drive. He's just like looking in the mirror, talking about his feelings. What is that? No. So be cautious when you hear these feminists, because since she hates Christianity, she hates a Christian form of masculinity. She tries to use Muslims as a pawn, but she clearly, by her values, hates Islam. You can't get around that. Since she hates white people and is a self-hating white, she's going to necessarily hate white heterosexual Muslims. So no matter which way you map her arguments, you're going to see that she should not be telling men how to be masculine. That's the crazy part. Honey, you need to go... But she literally has like purplish hair, like short, like very masculine cut. You should go tell your tribe how they should be. You don't get to tell our masculine men how to be. They should not be listening to you at all. Hatred of masculinity in the present it has become is often confused with hating men. Sorry, if you hate masculinity, you hate men. It's true that some people have been hurt enough in their lifetimes to lose hope in the entire gender. And that's a pity, but personally it's out of respect for men that I consider it so important to talk about toxic masculinity, about our culture, and about patriarchy. Okay, patriarchy benefits us because if you ever grown up without a father like me, without any real male figure guiding you, you make a lot more mistakes. And you have to learn the hard way, and it's exhausting, and you may lose your life, and you're going to come out with so much more trauma because you didn't have a male there to give you the heads up. A mother can be like, hey, I don't think you should marry this chick because she's coming off with a very witchy, occulted, gold digger vibe. Like, your mom can give you the 2 cents about a woman because we can know how the bullshit that other women do with each other. Men have this capacity as well. They can measure another man. It's a gift they have. We can do that, sort of. But how many women pick bad boys? And then they get pregnant, he leaves them, and then they're all on welfare. A lot of women make poor decisions when left to their own devices. Not to say that men, when they get money, they don't become stupid with their finances and get like a gold digger who takes half their wealth in divorce. But what I am saying is that the patriarchal system in its healthiest Islamic form protects women, and I really agree with that. Liberals have destroyed the nuclear family and have encouraged high amounts of fornication, and this has left women, doing OF, showing images of themselves in order to get some type of survival instinct. Because they don't have a dad or an uncle or anyone who will take care of them, and the men don't see it as their duty to support their womenfolk. Whereas in a patriarchy, you have a duty to support the women and children in your family if one of the men fails to do it. And the feminists don't have communes. They don't have all female communes run by all women to be a safe haven for women. But how many men pay high amounts of taxes more than women, and then they pay in? How many men want to be the rescuer? This is a common thing with men. They want to rescue a woman. Captain Save-A-Ho, right? That's an actual meme. The White Knight. You don't see feminists rushing in to save women. They just want to get you out of your house and into the drudgery of corporate office life or some sweatshop and then call you empowered. So you're with your children, you may be struggling with loneliness or some other thing, but then they put you in a new environment where your struggles are going to be worse, and you're going to be in like a customer service job getting screamed at hours a day by unruly people, you know, earning minimum wage or just above it, and then they call that empowering, and that's better for you to be out earning GDP for your country than at home raising your children, and that a daycare can do a better job raising the children than you. So in the feminist world, they don't really value what it is that a lot of women like. LinkedIn feminists see you as a loser for not competing, whereas men see it as more honorable that you're taking care of the children than seeking a career. Do you see? So the men actually are being more pro-woman than the actual feminists. It's feminists who are allowing men in dresses to invade our spaces. Yeah, there's TERFs, but it was the feminists who supported the rainbow flag, which got worse and worse. So we don't need her to talk about masculinity or the patriarchy. She should talk about her own mode, you know, not try to disrupt what we have going on. She's trying to, imagine you got a perfect stallion in your barn. She's trying to open that door and cut the reins and tell you to let it run free, and then you got like a very sickly old female donkey to do whatever it is you need to do around the farm. You see what I'm saying? She's giving you something less than. Modern masculinity is brittle and fragile. It reacts to any perceived threat by lashing out and shutting down. It is definitely resistant not just to change, but even to the thought of change. Well, it has changed over time because of Hollywood. Some people see being a rapper thug as masculine, whereas in the past that was not the case. You know, in prison, a man would show his butt cleavage to show that he's willing to be penetrated as a bottom. Because it's like, women have breast cleavage, men have butt cleavage. Then Hollywood flipped that around and made it seem like the guy who, if he's trying to run, his pants are so low, he's going to trip over his pants. His pants are sagging and dragging. You know, he's got no style. He can't even speak proper English. He's slurring. He's high. You know, got tattoos. They framed that as masculinity. So, whereas before, being masculine was providing, being honorable, you know, even dying for your country. Now we have people dying for street corners they don't even own. So masculinity has changed, but there are traits within each religion that are overlapping with others, right? So that's not true that it hasn't changed. If she thinks that, you know, people gotta act like Drake and paint their fingernails and have a very effeminate voice when they're not masquerading as a thug, well, you know, there's something to be talked about. I abhor these aspects of masculinity because I have seen too many men try with all their might to reject them, try bravely with no script, no safety rails, and no hope of a hero's reward, to believe that this narrow vision of masculinity is innate. I despair of it sometimes, and despair is exhausting, and I won't settle for it. I still want to understand why men do what they do, and how they can begin the work of change. Because, right now, too many men and boys seem to believe that change is impossible. A common fear among decent men struggling to know how to ethically exist in a male body. How to ethically exist in the male body. Ooh, if you were to say how a woman can ethically exist in a female body, she would scream, misogyny! In the modern age is that there is something inherently hateful and destructive in maleness itself. Ooh. No, what a... Okay, but if you said the same thing about women, she would get mad. She wants it to where you can trash men all day, but if you say women have a witchy side to them as well, and a self-destructive aspect, you should be banned, deplatformed, you hate women, you should be in jail. Like, this is what's really insane about these feminists, is that they prove their own point and their own hypocrisy. That there is some sort of original taint written in their genes. Look at that. Look at that. What she just said here. Their genes are tainted. If a man said women's genes are tainted, she'd be like, oh, how dare you, you're so outdated, you should be in prison, you should lose your company. She would be screaming at the sky. She would dye her hair a brighter purple. It'd be ridiculous. And the women as a whole might have correctly identified it. That's why the first and worst thing men say to women fighting for their own liberation is that they must hate men. Well, she does clearly hate men. She literally just called them tainted, that their genes are tainted, but then she says, oh, I don't hate men. There's wonderful things about men. And very wicked things about women. Because that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written us to be. There is evil in the world, and there is good in the world. The paradox of free will and how that will come about, nature versus nurture, all that, the environment you're raised and the influences and the jinn all play a role. But there's a lot of great things about men. Firefighters, they run into the danger to rescue. Okay? A woman can't pick up a certain weight of person. A man can. You see how many rescuers, how many men go to save women. It's astounding. Women are not, in my opinion, as charitable as men. I don't think so. They try to be, but there's like a pity that men have for women and their children. Women won't even do polygamy sometimes because they want to keep all the resources for themselves. Women will become evil stepmoms because they hate the stepchildren and they're jealous of their mother. Like, let's not pretend that women are perfect at all. It assumes that asking men to change their behavior is and must be the same as hating what they are on the deepest level. But being a good guy isn't about who you are, it's about what you do. I say it's both, because you are what you do. Actions speak louder than words. So many of the knee-jerk defenses of men who have done violent things, celebrities and ordinary guys alike, start on the premise that they are not that sort of person. In fact, everyone is that sort of person. Everyone who grew up in a patriarchy and learned that sex was both a terrible thing that women might one day suffer you to do to them and something that was vital to their identity as a man. That tension is a terrible thing to inhabit. Well, you're ignoring the fact that there's a certain distaste that men have when they think about a woman who's had 200 men or 8 guys at one time. They may watch it, they may do sinful things, while watching it on their phones. But if they loved a woman and they found out she did that, it'd be awful. Just like a woman can discover her husband's adult history search stuff that she sees on his phone, and suddenly a veil is lifted, something of utter disgust of his actions, right? So it's a very interesting paradox, but you just have to understand that's the hypocrisy of men. They make whores, but then they want to marry the whores. Some men, right? They want the perfect housewife, but they want her to be a porn star Barbie chef. It's very difficult, But women will want the billionaire, millionaire, guy they can control, but who also can't be controlled. It's a mess. So I think men and women both have that strange back and forth in their heads. Somewhere around the frayed edge of my 20s, I realized I'd been wrong about men. I've been putting the needs and feelings of men before my own, not because I'm an especially nice person. I don't think you're a nice person. But because that was how I'd heard you'd stay safe. There's survival tactics you have to learn. If you're going to be not thinking about his feelings. Because there's going to be times in your marriage where you both will put someone's feelings before yours. Okay, I want him to do this, but, he's not in the mood, so I'm going to be pissed, but I'm going to get over it. And sometimes you'll want something, he won't want to do it, and it'll irritate him, but he'll go and do it, right? Let's say you wanted a specific product at the store, he got the wrong one, and you're like, hey, I really needed this one, and then he drives back and does it, right? So you gotta be careful, you know? You have to have respect. You don't want to be so edgy that when someone's around you, they feel like they're walking on glass. There's compromise, harmony. You know, I'd made a mistake about men. I thought, as so many of us had, that the reason the world was overrun by populist tyrants and far-right demagogues driving the clown car of culture towards climate collapse. If you want to fix pollution, go ahead and say that, but she comes off with a lot of Marxist, communist talking points. China is a communist country. They have a lot of pollution problems. So, let's just talk about that. Was that men were unhappy, white men in particular. So funny you don't say anything about Chinese men when their skin is white. Middle-class white men especially. Oh, you see how she attacks? You see how she's like, middle-class man, how dare you, you construction people, you plumbers and electricians who keep this society going while I rant with my blue hair in this damn book. Think about that. She doesn't appreciate and she despises the men who make the world go round for her. I thought their comfort was more important than anyone else's consent. I was wrong. One of the central delusions of modern masculinity is the notion that men are emotionally repressed. In fact, men and boys are emotionally illiterate, because a great portion of them were raised to believe that emotional fluency is unmanly. Okay, I think you have to be really cautious with how you tell men to be emotional. I was working as a server. We were rushing busy. There was this guy. He was young, maybe 19. He started crying because he couldn't handle the rush. He sat down and cried. My female boss, she fired him on the spot. You know, built for this. I think he was a busboy, busser. And you can't be crying. Like, you're fired, you know. And one of my coworkers was pregnant at the time, and she never cried. She was grinding, you know. Shoot, you know, if you can't handle the heat in the kitchen, you got to go, baby. You can't have these Starbucks baristas crying about how long they work. You can't. You can cry when it's something real. Your dog died, a family member died. In Red Dead Redemption 2, when Arthur Morgan died, you know, some men report they cried. I cried. You get attached to a video game character and you can cry sometimes from a good story, right? From a good story, you know, mythos. You can feel something from that, a catharsis. Aristotle wrote about this sort of mimetic catharsis. That's why I like Greek tragedy, because it can make you cry, but with heroism. The Iliad, the trials of Hercules. It's not manly to be it's not unmanly to have emotions. It's how far you let it go. You cannot be a bumbling, crying buffoon when you have to suffer and freaking fight till the end. You know? You gotta be careful. There's mercy in your heart to have tears for the right moment. Like, I'm sure there's men crying in Gaza right now because of the children they're seeing being harmed. But some of them, they've cried so much they almost have no more tears, and now they're steady. They're not cold-hearted, they're not hard-hearted, but they're steady and stoic because they know they have to keep going, because when you cry too much, it only hurts yourself. Some women will cry so hard, their eyes will be so puffy that they can get Bell's palsy and have a sort of mini heart attack because they can't stop crying. There was a ridiculous woman who was getting interviewed by Andrew Wilson and Brian on the whatever podcast, this really crazy feminist. I tried not to watch that show, but it was some viral clips. And she was some type of psychologist, and she couldn't stop crying, and she was deeply mentally disturbed and can't control her emotions, and she was crying a lot and leaving and coming back, and you can see, like, no, that's not cool. You're not just supposed to cry for anything and everything and being an emotional wreck. So be careful when a feminist who hates masculinity, who hates heterosexuality, who hates white men, hates, as she just said, middle-class white men, she's telling you to cry more. She is that will repel women from you. If you are in a very dangerous situation and the person who's supposed to lead you is crying, you're going to be like, oh my God, we're going to die. You know, like, you can't have that, man. Like, your kids, if you're in danger, like, they look to you, mom and dad, like, oh, but if they just see you crying in this moment, it's like, what the hell? You need to make them feel safe, even if you don't know it's safe. You know, I want my pilot, if the plane is going down, I don't want him crying. I want him to be like, we're going to fix this. Okay, roger that. We're going to blah, 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 blah. Like, he's tuned in, even though we're going nosediving. Okay, if he's like, ooh, and he's just giving up. And I'm like, we're going to die. You know. No, like, you're on a ship and the waves are coming in. The ocean is beating up and you're like, oh, I'm afraid. But all of a sudden, the captain just lets go of the wheel. The wheel is spinning out of control. And he's like, and you're like, get a hold of yourself, man. Get a hold of yourself. Get your head in the game. We're going to get through this. If you have like a salty, he's got a cigar, you know. Let's get through the storm. And you're like, that's my guy. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, he's going to get us out of here. That's what we need, right? It's like, this woman is crazy. Just so crazy. How else could we have wound up in this toxic, twisted place where men so routinely mistake their own feelings for facts? Where men who are in love or lust experience those desires as overwhelming imperatives that demand. Men are not, in fact, less emotionally capable than women by nature. It's simply that women and girls are expected to learn to manage their own feelings and to consider those of others at a far earlier stage. I'd say a bit of both, you know? I'd say there's a bit of both of that. So, you know, we'll examine that. Okay, I can hear my family's back, so I'm gonna pause here, okay? But just think about what she said. She's like, I don't hate men. Then goes on to say, like, you know, masculinity is a prison, and, you know, patriarchy has to be destroyed, and then I get to tell heterosexual men what's toxic about their masculinity, and I'm gonna pick on white men in particular, and middle-class white men especially. Say what? Get out of here. Absolute baloney. Whew. Man, imagine me and her in a debate. Maybe one day, inshallah, but I think she's so radical. I think that she would actually, be the type of woman who would go so crazy that she would, like, try to destroy your life. That's the vibes I get from this lady. I see, like, these type of women, I think they're the kind who are supposed to be on watch lists. Because they dislike men so much, to the point that if they found a woman, like, being kind to men, they would, like, spaz out and get all their really disgruntled, bitter cavalry to come in and, like, swarm any woman who decides to stick up for men. But the good part of that is you can stand behind men, and men in the patriarchy protect you, and men will always overcome some women's desires. Like Gilgamesh and Ishtar, you know? Like Yusuf and that woman who tried to overcome him, you know? There's much of that. We don't have... The Prophet, peace be upon him, is never conquered by a woman. None of the companions were conquered by women. And so that tells us that us Muslim women must stand behind our Muslim men so they can protect us from the lunacy and degeneracy of the secular liberal atheist women, the leftists and whatnot. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, and subscribe and share. If you'd like to see more about what I write, you can join my blog at www.subscribestar.com/MilhanArchive. Hope to see you there, and I've been writing on there more, so it'll be worth your $5 a month. You know, it takes a lot of time, but I have put up quite a lot about there, and a wide variety of topics. From culinary to current events, you name it. You'll get a lot of information on there, both educational and entertaining. So I'm not monetized, so that helps. Take care. Till next time.